Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. I'll show you the coaches poll and the AP poll if you show me your poll, Lauren.
Do I really have to show the whole thing? I mean, I can tell you.
All right, so the coaches poll came out last week for the college football season. The AP preseason top 25 poll came out today. And let's start with the thing that matters locally. North Carolina shows up number 9 last week in the coaches, number 10 in the AP poll. Where did you have UNC ranked as a voter?
12.
Okay.
And that was about as low as I would put them without feeling like, oh no, I don't think that they're going to have a worse season than any of these other teams. You know, because I understand the argument. Like when you look at a team like a North Carolina, I get it, right? Now that I'm a voter, I see things a little bit differently. But I understand the argument of like, top 10? What? You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I understand. Because you're like, I don't know if that's a top 10 team. As Mac Brown said yesterday, it's a top 10 team with a lot of work to do. And that's fine. Although it's just funny, like their problems are so first world now. It's like, who's going to be the backup quarterback? It's like, well, wouldn't that be a nice problem? You know, it's a nice problem to have if you don't know who you're, or like, how are we going to incorporate all these young, talented defensive linemen? It's like, yeah, that's a nice problem to have as opposed to some other teams. But yeah, I mean, you just start to get to a point where it's like, I don't know who I'm going to rank ahead of them. And I feel like it would be performative somewhat if I did. So
that's the part that I think we got to focus on as it relates to North Carolina and why they're ranked where they're ranked. First off, what is the preseason poll about? It's an expectation. It's what voters think this team is capable of doing. That's why you see sight unseen Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, and the like where they are ranked. There's the expectation that they're going to be competing for a national championship. That makes sense. With North Carolina, I think it's the same kind of thing in terms of an expectation. I think they get a Mac Brown bump. Everybody loves Mac Brown. I think we all understand that. Other coaches love Mac Brown. Media members love Mac Brown. They like what's happened at North Carolina. The other reason why North Carolina gets a top 10 bump is because they have a name quarterback in Sam Howell. Now that the shadow of Trevor Lawrence is gone because he's in the NFL, it's a little bit of an open season in the ACC. Sam Howell, given what we saw statistically last year, is the name that people are going to attach themselves to. He's going to be the quarterback in the ACC that gets a lot of a lot of NFL draft hype because he's going to be going pro after this. So all these things, come together, and it makes sense for North Carolina to be in the top 10. Whether they actually can finish in the top 10 throughout the course of the season is another matter, but in terms of expectations, it makes total sense why they're ranked where they're ranked.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I can only speak to my philosophy, right? We have the normal powers that be, and they're going to be there in some order.
Of course.
So the top 4 was already predetermined. It was just a question of the order. And for me, Alabama's a given, right?
And honestly, Ohio State doesn't even have to play. It's a given. They're going to be in the top 4. You know what I mean?
I mean, pretty much.
Not that we didn't see that. Not that we didn't see that last year or anything like that.
So for me, the way I sort of tried to shake out the rest, and I say try because I do understand the importance of talent at other positions and things like that, is a question of quarterback play. Because to me, in football, it generally all starts there. And if you have a quarterback coming back that I've watched play, we've all watched play, and is a proven commodity, or at least was good enough, for me, I'm going to give you a bit of a bump anyway. Like, you could argue that I actually was probably more unfair to North Carolina than I was to some other teams that I gave more of a bump because, their quarterback's coming back. If there was a question there for me, or if I was seeing offensive line questions for a given team, or if they lost a lot on defense or whatever it was, I definitely would take that into account. But there are really only 4 programs that don't have to deal with that like everybody else and get that benefit out. Everybody else, you're just sort of going based on what they've got coming back and what question marks are still. I mean, A&M is going to be a top 10 team preseason that lost a lot. Like, look at what Texas A&M lost. But they recruited at a high level. But at the same time, have they earned more, as much benefit of the doubt as like, no, of course they haven't. So I mean, like, why are we, for instance, I know we do it locally because this is what we do, right? We see North Carolina ranked and we go, oh, we got to be mad that they're ranked so high. They're overrated. But like, why aren't we hopping on somebody like that who they haven't proven anything either? Like,
well, I think that's the issue for North Carolina. All those teams that you just referenced at least have some sort of track record of being in the top 25 consistently. This is the highest.
Does A&M?
Well, I think A&M with recruiting, Jimbo Fisher as the head coach, given the SEC bump, I think those things. Why does Texas keep showing up in the top 25? Given the history of what we've seen with Texas, but it's Texas, so it is what it is.
Yeah.
The issue with North Carolina is that they have not been here consistently. This is the highest they've been ranked in the preseason top 25 since 1997. Last year in the pandemic season, they made them what I think as high as fifth, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 5 going into Florida State.
And we had this debate last year. You and I got into arguments about this last year, where I did not view them as a top 5 team in this country. But you kept pointing out to me as a voter, well, who else am I supposed to rank at this point in the season? Right. And I totally understood that. And I also think to one thing that you just said, and we can kind of move forward on this particular topic, because North Carolina is the local team that we focus on.
Yeah.
We scrutinize them more. We know them better than the other teams. And that's why when I see them in the top 10, I get a little skeptical, because I'm still remembering a defense that couldn't stop anybody last year. I'm remembering a team that needed to win in shootouts that didn't necessarily have to be shootouts. Like, why were you in a shootout with Virginia? Why were you in a shootout with Wake Forest? When things bogged down, you suddenly found yourself scrambling to even get within the game, like Florida State, where when you went up against tougher competition, like Notre Dame's smothering defense, you couldn't get out of your own way. There's so much that is relied upon for North Carolina season on their offense that I really think we shouldn't be talking about Sam Howell. We should be talking about whether or not 83% of the starters that are coming back, or 83% of the defense is coming back, can they take that next step so that they're not giving up 6 yards a play, that they don't have the 75th defense in terms of points allowed. That matters if this team is going to be a top 10 contender.
Yeah, I think there's that. And then Mac talked about it yesterday too. And I actually think this is low-key super important. And I know we have a hard time with this because we all have a hard time talking about this aspect of the game because there's so many kind of variables to it, but like special teams.
Yes.
I mean, they haven't blocked a punt since he's been back. He talked about that too. Mm-hmm. You know, they've run into the kicker a few times. Yeah, yeah. They haven't. Well, they have not won games that way, and it's lost them games. Like you could absolutely make that case. So that's a big one too.
I ran into Chuck Amato, the former NC State head football coach at Clues in downtown Raleigh last week. And when he talked about the special teams, the first thing that came to mind was Chuck Amato talking about hidden yardage. It's the kicking game.
It's true.
The hidden yardage. That's where games are won and lost. And it's true, though. Those things do matter in close games. A blocked punt can go a long way towards stopping the team.
Something else Mac was pointing out too was like Daz Newsom's a great punt returner. He's really dangerous with the ball in his hands. But they didn't do a good enough job last year of giving him the ball in situations where he could do anything with it because nobody was afraid of their punt block. Ergo, you know, you could kind of load up on the return. And he was talking about at Texas, they had good punt returns because people were worried about your punt block. And if they don't have to worry about that. So there's just so many number of things that go into it. It's field position. It's all these other things. I think for me, talent matters, right? And we've seen that North Carolina, you know, certainly offensively, defensively, especially defensively, though, they've gotten some talented guys in there. They have talent on that side of the ball. They have more depth, which I think will lead to better special teams. They won however many games last year with their defense being largely bad and their special teams being largely bad. So really all they need is a marginal improvement to actually get up to that level. Can they do it and can they be there consistently? I don't know, but I think that's kind of what I was looking at, right? Is that offense was so special that that's all they needed. Do I think they can improve enough? Yeah, I think they can improve enough. Will they? Don't know.
We were talking to Michael Felder in the bleachers on Twitter. He's got a new podcast called Tape Don't Lie on Stadium. And I asked him about the defense. Like, we can say all these things that you just laid out. And his response to that was, that's all great, but can they tackle?
Right. And
that sounds simple enough, right? You'd think by now you know how to tackle. But this is something that we used to talk about with Steve Logan when he was doing radio with us. By the time you get to college, you either know how to tackle or you don't. You know, like you can work on this kind of stuff, but like the fundamentals of tackling, either you have it or you don't. There could be some marginal improvements, but that was a big concern for Felder based on what he saw last year. Can they just make a stop? Can they bring somebody to the ground? Can they get to the quarterback?
That's
another matter as well. And that's what gets back to relying so much on your offense. This is something we talked about with Wes Durham last week. Sam Howell isn't the only QB in this league. Obviously, he is the focal point. We understand why. But Wes's opinion is that this could be a banner season for QBs in the ACC. Can North Carolina's defense get to those opposing QBs? Can they get past Virginia Tech in the first game, which is another thing that has got some North Carolina fans who have seen going to Blacksburg as a house of horrors in the last couple of years. Can you get past that? Because if you can get past the Hokies, the rest of your schedule definitely opens up that you can be hovering with it, maybe even in the top 5. Not if you play your cards right and things kind of break your way. So there's just we'll know a lot about North Carolina in week 1, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, you really will, and that's the thing. Like, it's a lot of it's going to be answered pretty early. I think that they also had. I know Bill Connolly talks some about bad turnover luck and good turnover luck. They didn't have the best turnover luck last year either. I think that that's something that will probably flip this year. Like, it is kind of crazy to think about the fact that they barely got any turnovers last year as a defense, right? Like, just not a whole lot. They weren't very good on defense half the time. Their special teams were bad, and they still did what they did. Like, I think, to me, that's where I kind of look at it the way that I do, is like the offense was that good last year. It was genuinely that good. And by the end of the year, you started to see the defense catch up some because of the young, talented guys that were forced to be out there. Now, is it going to be enough? I don't know. Can the special teams be good enough? We'll see. But, and Mac's been talking about it because, like, it's Virginia Tech's going to have this circle. Like, they don't like North Carolina. It's mutual, I'm sure. Yes. Like, this is anything you're seeing now. Like, there is no margin for error. There is no ease into the season. There's none of that. And so, you do you don't get that sort of like, oh, we'll get these things worked out in the course of camp kind of feeling from them at all, because they know they don't really have time for that.
Do you rank NC State?
Yes.
Like what?
I did.
23, 22?
18.
18?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, to me, again, what did I say I value, right? Returning experience. I value returning quarterback play.
State's well here, but we don't know enough about Devin Leary. That's the thing. I mean,
we know more than nothing, and we know that
we know more than nothing. But the sample size, and look, Devin Leary, where I was skeptical of Devin Leary a couple of years ago through that whole process, based on the limited sample size that we saw last year, I can see why people are high on Devin Leary going forward. But again, we have to remind, or at least I have to remind people, it's still a small sample size.
Well, no, it's
from Devin Leary. I think the focal point for NC State is the depth on defense being their strength, and that's going to be the thing that's going to make NC State interesting.
Yeah, the defense will make them interesting, but I think the offense should be able to do enough too. And that's the other part of it, right? It's like I don't want to say it's the reverse of North Carolina, but in a sense, right? Like I like a lot of what they've got coming back on defense, as long as they can like not get ejected for and not have the silly drive extending penalties, the defense will be fine. So then it becomes a question of, okay, can the offense do enough? And I think that they probably, but Tim Beck spoke to reporters today, NC State's offensive coordinator, and he actually said, somebody asked like if it was good for Devin in a way to be able to watch, and he's like, I don't really think, he's like, no, experience is better. Like you want the guy to have experience more. He's like, I know what you're saying, but like, no. And I think that is interesting because he did miss out on a lot of that stuff, but they're high on him. And again, they won 8 games last year, with totally new coaches, like with duct tape. And so for me, that matters. And coming into a season healthy, like nothing against LSU. I know LSU's earned more benefit of the doubt over the years than like an NC State, but LSU won way fewer games last year. And I have a lot more questions about them. So like I ranked NC State above LSU.
Yeah, much like North Carolina, we'll find out about NC State relatively early, not week 1, but certainly when they see Mississippi State the following week. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We're so close to the start of the football season. We'll see you then.